The 10 Kings Time Script, Part 2. My name is Daniel Valles and welcome to our channel. Working time frame. How do these 10 kings, these 10 horns, know the time? How can they script things so perfectly? All these historic events from the beginning of sorrows to the end. How do they know the time frame? Well, the Bible tells us prophecy and the timetable. They are aware of that. They know what prophetic time it is. We're here in 2023, but 2,600 years ago, that is when Israel went into captivity, the dispersion judgment, and God prophesied that they would be judged for 430 years. They were going to spend 70 years in Babylon, but there was still 360 years remaining of their punishment, where they would be able to start returning to the land, but it would not be their land. Others would still rule over them. There would just be a province still. And many Christians are aware that Israel went into captivity, was in Babylon for 70 years, but they aren't aware of how long did that last. They think, well, they served their time, then they went on to other events. But there's a crucial verse that God told them that they need to keep in mind whenever He punishes them. And this is important because they went into captivity because they were punished. But God told them very specifically 4 different times in Leviticus 26, 18, 21, 24, and 28. He repeated it 4 times. If you do not hearken to when I chastise you, I will multiply the punishment by 7. Israel did not return to the Lord when they returned out of Babylon after the 70 years, so the remaining 360 years of their dispersion was multiplied by 7. And this is something that God warned them 4 different times in the covenant that He made with them, and they agreed to it. That if He ever had to punish them and they did not repent and hearken to it, He would multiply the remaining punishment by 7. Now, when they came out of Babylon, did they turn to the Lord? Did they return to being a righteous nation? No. They rebuilt the temple with the help of Ezra and Nehemiah, but you also remember that they quickly returned to the sins that they were involved with prior to captivity. Nehemiah is even recorded as having to smack some of the leaders of Israel around saying, "What are you doing? You are getting involved in the same thing that got us in trouble the first time." Multiple major leaders in Israel, their heart hadn't returned to God. They quickly turned back to what they were already involved with. And so it was real apparent that they did not heed the lesson of the captivity in Babylon. So the remaining time that they still had to serve, God automatically invoked what He said He would do, the righteous judge, by multiplying it times 7. Which means their judgment would be 2,520 prophetic years of captivity that they would have to serve because of their rebellion. And when you convert the prophetic years to Gregorian count years, that will end exactly in 1948. That is when they will have finished serving their term. Up until that point, though, others will rule over them. And that was the punishment of the captivity. You will not be your own people. You will not have your own nation until you finish your captivity, until you finish your punishment. Since the time of the dispersion, they have been under foreign control and occupation. The Babylonians, the Medes and Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantine Empire, the Arab Caliphates, Ottoman Empire. They have had other people ruling over their land, ruling over their territory, which has prevented them from returning and claiming it as a nation. They have not been able to do that because of the captivity that God Himself placed on them. And this is also important for understanding the millennium has not happened yet. There's a lot of people out there, amazingly, who believe the millennium has happened. But Jesus Christ cannot rule and reign for 1,000 years over His people as their king until they finish their captivity, where they will be under foreign control and occupation. That is the punishment that He gave to them. He will not negate what He said He would do. The millennium has definitely not happened. Jesus Christ cannot rule from Jerusalem as He said He will. He cannot even rule over His people at all until they return to the land. Only then can one of their own kings of the tribe of Judah rule over them. They will have a foreign control and ruler over them up until that point. They have to finish the prophetic time that God Himself said would have to be fulfilled. And so this is important to understanding the Antichrist and the children of darkness as they are working toward the events of the end, getting ready to hand over power to the beast. They know when the last generation would go into effect. They knew when the land would be allowed to return to the children of Israel. They knew when God would finally say, yes, they can finally have their land back. And when the children of darkness would be manipulated like pawns, they think for their own goals with the promised land, that crossroads of the world where prophetic events are going to happen. They know when those events will happen, but God is manipulating them to actually fulfill His will, to fulfill when He said they would be replanted in the land. And that's what He told the disciples. When you see them replanted, when you see the fig tree finally putting forth fruit again, after all this time, that is when the rest of the prophetic events will happen. The wars, the rumors of wars, pestilence, famine, all that. And that's going to be the beginning of sorrows, but then that's going to lead into the final prophetic events that will lead to the tribulation, the final battle, there at the crossroads of the world. And then that is going to start Christ's millennial reign, when He will rule and reign for 1,000 years. Because they have finally returned to the land, they can finally have the Son of David rule over them, just like prophecy has said. But they have to wait till the captivity ends in 1948. And the children of darkness have known this, and so all their historic events, they're working and manipulating, moving chess pieces around, are pegged toward that they know the script is all pegged toward Israel's replanting. And that same last generation will see those beginning events. They will see the seventh king during those events. They will know who he was. And they also be surprised when he shows up at the very end, too, with those events when he comes up out of the bottomless pit. The Bible tells us all this, and that they're working with the mother of harlots together. And so as we have a scriptural understanding, we can start to see how historic events are playing toward a final conclusion. A biblical Jewish understanding. Genesis 12:3. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. In thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. This is a very important promise and warning that we need to keep in mind, all Christians need to keep in mind when talking about these final world events and historic events, particularly relating to the subject of the Jews. And I've seen so many times, unfortunately, that a lot of Christians will paint with a very broad brush, and lump all Jews together. But always remember God's specific warning that He gave to Abraham. I will curse him that curseth thee. And friend, I just want to warn you, we are talking about events that revolve around the Middle East, and the people there. Do not lump the true children of Israel together with the children of darkness. And if you paint with a broad brush and say all of them in Israel are the synagogue of Satan, and I've heard so many Christians say that, they'll just paint with a completely broad brush. You will get yourself into some royal trouble. You will curse yourself. You will curse your family if you paint with a broad brush and you slander those who are true Jews. And if you paint with a broad brush, you will include them and you will end up slandering them. And God tells us that that is one of the specific things that He hates, is when slander is done, particularly to those that He says, don't curse them or I will curse you. And I've seen individuals personally who wonder why their prayer life suddenly went dead cold, and why God was so quiet in their life when they were venting their spleen so openly against the Jews, and painting with a very broad brush against prophetic events that God said will happen. God will fulfill this promise and this warning here, so do not ever paint with a broad brush, and do not lump all of Israel together as being the same type of Jews. Do not lump all of them together as being the children of darkness or as the synagogue or Satan or whatever else nonsense is going out around. Be very specific. Do not paint with a broad brush, and you will curse yourself if you include those who shouldn't be cursed. Zechariah chapter 2. Ho, ho, come forth and flee from the land of the north, saith the Lord. For I have spread you abroad as the four winds of the heavens, saith the Lord. Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwelleth with the daughter of Babylon. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath He sent me unto the nations which spoiled you. For he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of His eye. Verse 12, And the Lord shall inherit Judah His portion in the holy land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. Again, this is very important to consider the time frame that God told them when they would be returning. It would be sometime in the future. Their captivity would not end till 1948, when God would inherit Judah, His portion in the holy land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. God will fulfill His word. Even if He has to use a jackass, even if He has to use the children of darkness as pawns to make it happen, He will return His focus to the Holy Land again. He will give Judah back their portion. His focus, the capital, will be Jerusalem again. Jesus will rule one day in a physical land of Israel after his people have physically returned to that land. It will be fulfilled. And in this passage where he says he will do that, keeping in mind that they got some time until that will happen, he will call them out of the nations to that holy land again. It's going to be a mix of people who will return there too, but he will have true Jewish individuals who will inherit Judah again in that holy land. There will be true Jews there. So again, when you refer to Israel, or if you have to vent your spleen against the works of darkness that are present in that land, and just like the judges of Israel, we should call out wickedness, but don't paint with a broad brush those who aren't. For in the same passage where he says they will return to the land, he gives that same warning: he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of his eye. Yes, God will have true Jews return to the Holy Land, to Judah, to Israel, to Jerusalem. They will get their land back again. That is the fulfillment of prophecy. It's God's land. He is going to give it back to them. They will be the rightful owners. He will have his legitimate children there. And so do not slander the fulfillment of prophecy. And so do not paint with a broad brush and slander the children of Jacob who returned to the land. They are there. There are some there. There's a whole lot of other ethnicities there too as well, but there are legitimate children of Jacob there. And that's why you should not paint with a broad brush. And this is a sober warning that you must always keep in mind as you study these historic events unfolding and prophecy unfolding. If you touch the apple of God's eye, do not be surprised if he turns his face away from you. You will curse yourself, you will curse your family, and you will have zero prayer life communication with God. The Apostle Paul sums up really well how we should refer to the children of darkness. That's what we should refer to them as. Don't get caught up in ethnicities and racial and skin color and all that. Just focus on what are they. There are the children of darkness working in Israel. Yes, they are manipulating the events. God put it in their heart to fulfill his will. Scripture tells us that, yes, they're going to be there. They're going to be involved. That does not negate what God is doing there. That does not negate that there are true children of Jacob there. Don't ever lose sight of that. The children of darkness will stand out by their works. You will know them by their works. We can call them out on that. We can pray for the peace of Jerusalem, that God will hinder the work of darkness there. You can pray for the peace of Jerusalem. You can pray that God will open the eyes of the children of Jacob. You can pray in positive ways toward the land of Judah, the land of Israel, without endorsing the works of darkness. You can make that distinction. That's what you should do. Don't ever paint with a broad brush. Don't ever lump them together, or you will find yourselves poking the eyes of God, and he will turn his face away from you. Always refer to them just like the Apostle Paul refers to those who are the children of darkness. You will know them by their works. Call them what they are, the children of darkness. And this is the exact same approach that Jesus Christ employed when he was here too. When he was talking to the children of Israel, he specifically always directed his focus and his harsh words to those who were responsible, to those who were actually the vipers. When he talked to the scribes and Pharisees who rejected him, he said straight to their face, "Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it." We can call out wickedness. We can call out the children of darkness. But don't lump or paint with a broad brush those who aren't in that picture. Be very specific. Clarify who you're talking about. That's what Jesus did. And that's what the Apostle Paul does. But also notice that Jesus Christ described the children of darkness will act like their father, the devil, Satan, which also causes us to be sober. As we see the children of darkness, those who reject the 7 pillars, they love death. That's going to be reflected in their outlook on life, their actions. And Jesus Christ even described that of the scribes and Pharisees, who were essentially a secret society with a lot of teachings that they did bring out of Babylon even at that time. He told them, "You are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning." And notice they're going to follow the same footsteps of their father, the devil. The children of darkness will be just like their father. And what did they end up doing? They ended up being a murderer too, as they rejected Jesus Christ. And so as we see the children of darkness today, do not be surprised that they have certain courses of action that they wrong their own soul, that a normal person would not normally do. They love death, and so their actions will follow that. And Jesus even told them that straight to their face too. If you are the children of darkness, you will act like your father, the devil. It does not matter your race or skin color. If you act like the devil, you're a child of darkness. But this also helps clarify our understanding for, yes, there are children of darkness even in Israel nowadays, and the government and high positions who are manipulating things for sure. But that also gives us a clue when we understand, how do the children of darkness, how do the children of the devil work? They will sometimes work to the wronging of their own souls, which means because they love death, it should not shock us, although it does shock our sensibilities, but we understand that they love death. It should not surprise us when we see that serpents turn against their own. They will sometimes choose actions where they will throw their own kind under the bus. And this is important in prophecy because I've heard so many Christians say, well, no, they won't agree to that, and so it can't be possible because a normal Jewish person would not do that if that was part of prophecy, or if that person was the Antichrist, or if this was happening. No, you got to remember, they're serpents. They love death. They don't even care about their own. They don't. And even Scripture reminds us this of John 11:47. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation, the province that they were allowed at that time. And one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, Ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. Verse 2, And Pilate asked him, Art thou the king of the Jews? And he answering said unto him, Thou sayest it. Now at that feast Pilate released unto them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the insurrection. And the multitude crying aloud began to desire him to do as he had ever done unto them. But Pilate answering them, saying, Will ye that I release unto you the King of the Jews? For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him for envy. But the chief priests moved the people, that he should rather release Barabbas unto them. And Pilate answered and said again unto them, What will ye then that I shall do unto him whom ye call the King of the Jews? And they cried out again, Crucify him. Crucify him. This is an interesting perspective of those that Jesus Christ told to their face, Ye are of your father the devil. The secret society of the religious leaders who had openly rejected Jesus Christ. Verse 50, Caiaphas makes it very clear, it is expedient for us that we throw one of us under the bus. They don't have allegiance to their own when they have their own political or religious interests in mind. And this is something you'll also see in history unfold too. The children of darkness have no hesitation about throwing even one of their own kinfolk under the bus, or persecuting even their own kinfolk, because they see it as expedient for political purposes. And when Pilate went to release Jesus Christ, the King of the Jews, the people purposefully chose something that would not make logical sense. The children of darkness worked in a way that would wrong their own souls, that would normally wrong their own people. Because they chose Barabbas, who, notice it says, he committed insurrection, and he committed murder in that insurrection. Now, because the Romans had him locked up, and apparently Pilate did not think that they would call for the releasing of Barabbas, this gives us a clue that Barabbas did not kill a Roman, he killed Jews. He was a murderer of Jews. He committed murder in the insurrection, and apparently it wasn't just one person. He committed murder, mass murder of some sort. That's why they got him locked up. But the people, stirred up by the chief priests who had rejected Jesus Christ, rebelled against Jesus Christ, they wronged their own soul by choosing someone who even killed those of their own. When you hate and reject the 7 pillars, when you rebel against the Creator, you will love death. You will choose actions that are actually harmful to yourself and to your own people. And this is the history that Scripture records for us. So we should not be surprised that we see similar actions by those who also reject Jesus Christ playing out in history as they prepare to hand over power to the beast, and playing out in geopolitical events relating to the land of Israel. Isaiah 28:14 gives us an interesting insight to the religious leaders of Israel, and it appears to apply to the last days, during the time of the tribulation. Wherefore hear the word of the Lord, ye scornful men that rule this people which is in Jerusalem. Because ye have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with hell are we at agreement. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come unto us. For we have made lies our refuge, and under falsehood have we hid ourselves. Therefore thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. He that believeth shall not make haste. Judgment also will I lay to the line, and righteousness to the plummet. And the hail shall sweep away the refuge of lies, and the waters shall overflow the hiding place. And your covenant with death shall be disannulled, and your agreement with hell shall not stand. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, then ye shall be trodden down by it. This appears to apply to the very last days, when there's going to be a final scourge that will come through the land. And a covenant is made by the religious leaders, those that rule the people. They have made a covenant with the works of darkness, with hell, with death, and they think it's going to protect them during this time. God says, no, that's not going to work out that way. Verse 16 is interesting because he talks about the tried stone, the cornerstone. And you remember when Christ was here, he told them, you have rejected the cornerstone. That's from this verse, from this passage here. And of course, Jerusalem was scraped down to dirt. They thought they were safe then too. But at the same time, when they rejected that chief cornerstone, remember he also told them there will be a pilgrim prophecy. There will be another nation that will bring forth fruit. That is in the same connection with this passage. And of course, that nation is America with the pilgrims, and that was fulfilled way after the events in Jerusalem. So there's a lot that tells us and indicates that this covenant with death and hell is referring to the tribulation time. Once they return to the land and the events then, they think that they're going to be safe because they've made a covenant with the children of darkness, with the rulers of Jerusalem who are also children of darkness. Which is interesting that they make a covenant with death and hell, and the book of Revelation tells us that when the bottomless pit is opened and the four horsemen of the apocalypse comes on the scene, that death is coming with them too. They think they're going to be safe. So this appears to apply, keeping in mind the children of darkness at the very last days and the last events as they get ready to hand over power to the beast. Yes, there will be children of darkness in rulership positions in the land of Israel. We understand that. The Bible forewarns us that they are pawns that God will move around to fulfill his will. That does not negate prophecy. It fulfills prophecy. Understanding the children of darkness will play a role in the end-time prophetic events. They will be the ones putting out the calls of peace and safety. They will be the ones who know that sudden destruction is coming, that scourge is coming through the land. They think they're safe, but they're not going to escape. They know all this because they know the prophetic time. That's why they can script all these events. That's why they can script the sudden destruction. That's why they can script putting out the calls of peace and safety. And as we have the understanding of who is saying this, the children of darkness, the children of the devil, we need to armor up, be girded with truth, understanding what Scripture says, and hold fast to what Scripture says so we have a scriptural perspective of what is unfolding. And only then will we be able to see it the way that we need to see it. As we watch, we need to be sober. Of course, the land of Israel, the work there in the land of Israel is associated with the hexagram, a very unique symbol which has come onto the scene only in our modern time. How Israel got its flag and what it means. The Star of David began as a universal symbol, but became associated with Judaism mainly in the 17th century. The blue and white came even later. During the Middle Ages, Jewish mystics began to attribute mystical powers to the pentagram and hexagram, which began to appear on talismans against evil spirits. At first, both shapes were called the Seal of Solomon, but over time that name became exclusive to the pentagram, while the hexagram came to be called Magen David, the Shield of David. In the High Middle Ages and early modern periods, the Star of David began to appear in Jewish art as well, sometimes adorning the covers of Jewish books. Nothing indicates that the star enjoyed any special symbolic meaning then beyond its alleged magical power to ward off evil spirits. Notice that the Star of David had nothing to do with what we see as modern Israel. Its only association was with mysticism and magic. up until this modern time. That's the only association it ever had. The Star of David's big break came in 1648 when Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II gave the Jews of Prague permission to fly a Jewish flag over their synagogue in recognition of their part in saving the city from the Swedish invaders who besieged the city as part of the 30 Years' War. This Jewish flag, quote-unquote, was red, scarlet, with a yellow Star of David at its center. Again, using the symbol that up until that time was only associated with Jewish mysticism and magic. That's the only thing it was ever associated with. Sometime later, preparing for the First Zionist Congress held in Basel, Switzerland in 1897, David Wolfson, Zionist leader Theodor Herzl's second command, had the first Zionist flag made. The Star of David in its center had 6 smaller stars in each one of its points and another little star over it. These were supposed to symbolize the 7-hour workday Herzl envisioned for the future Jewish state. In addition, in the middle of the Star of David was a lion. We do not know how and when the lion and little stars disappeared from the Zionist flag, but a photo from the 10th Zionist Congress proves that by 1911, the flag had taken its modern form of the blue and white stripes and just the star. Unlike the menorah, the Lion of Judah, the shofar, and the lulav, the hexagram was not originally a uniquely Jewish symbol. The term Seal of Solomon was adopted by Jews from Islamic magic literature, but the esoteric philosophy behind it had pre-Islamic Jewish roots and provides, among other arguments, the Talmud's mention of the hexagram as being engraved on Solomon's seal ring. Of course, keeping in mind Solomon went into idolatry and apostasy later in life, Jewish alchemists, that's what it's associated with. The hexagram, however, only becomes widespread in Jewish magical texts and amulets in the early Middle Ages, which is why most modern authors have seen Islamic mysticism as the source of the medieval Spanish Kabbalists' use of the hexagram. So even the secular world will tell you the hexagram is 100% an occult symbol, associated with Jewish alchemy, magical texts, magical amulets, Kabbalist use. And because of that, Christians should avoid hexagram motifs, banners, jewelry, etc., the appearance of endorsement of its practice and its associated agents. You should not have this symbol flying as a flag in your house or as jewelry. Don't give the appearance of endorsement because the symbol is 100% an occult symbol. And even the secular world will tell you this had nothing to do with Jewish life whatsoever except in the realm of magic. Only in modern times has it started to be used for what the outward person outside of occult circles sees it as associated with Israel because it's on the flag. And so they think it's a Jewish symbol where it's a occult symbol. But we also need to keep in mind that the technical emblem of Israel, the state seal of Israel, it is the menorah, which is a true Jewish emblem. And so when I refer to Israel properly as the fulfillment of prophecy in the land as God sees it, I like to use the state emblem, which is the menorah, because that is truly associated with God's concept of Israel. And if you want to point to the children of darkness concept of the land of Israel, then you should point to the hexagram. But you should also make a distinction when you know there is a distinction. So as we go forward, keep in mind that the first flag associated with Jewish interests was in 1648. It was a red flag with a yellow hexagram on it that was only associated with Jewish mysticism at that time. Power structure. As we understand the 10 kings, the 10 horns are going to be working overtime on a script, understanding a time frame. We understand they're going to be working in stages, working toward that, making multiple steps, multiple geopolitical actions, history, part of these wars and rumors of wars. They are going to be working things on the chessboard, getting things ready, which also tells us that there's 10 kings, which means that there's a lot of pawns and other players involved on this chessboard too. The 10 kings are just at the top. There are many other players who are following their lead. And just from scripture, we know there is a hierarchy. We know the 10 kings are somewhere near the top, but ultimately there is a strong demonic and fallen angel presence at the very top. That is who ultimately controls things. The Bible tells us that the principles, the principalities, the chiefs, the powers, the rulers of the darkness of this world, they're not flesh and blood. It's a spiritual wickedness that pervades the very, very top. They are the ones who ultimately control things. They are the ones who make the decisions. They pull the strings. But immediately under them, there are powers in high places. There are rulers in high places. But there is a connection of the flesh and blood with the children of darkness, the ones who put out the peace and safety warnings, the ones who are putting into effect this geopolitical goal, getting things ready for the Antichrist. And we don't have the exact idea of the hierarchy, but just to use a chess analogy, we know there are different levels. We know at the very top, somewhere near the top, it consists of houses and bloodlines, family houses and bloodlines, sometimes royal families and bloodlines. We know that some of the top players are the Rothschilds, Sassoon, Spag, Montefiore, Warburg, Lehman, Goldman, and many others. We know there are prominent houses of influence in our world. And they have a lot more power than the average person realizes. And a lot of people think of them at the top, and usually the Rothschilds get the most attention. They really seem to be the leader of the pack of the financial power at the top. But there is also a suspicion, and I would kind of go with that suspicion too, that there is one more layer of flesh and blood above them, because the Rothschilds are very visible once you look for them and the other financial players. It does appear that there may be one more level above them who is actually calling the major shots, who actually interacts with the true principles of this world, the rulers of darkness of this world. But we know the Rothschilds and those particular money changer children of darkness are very near the top, if not at the top. They are very close because of the power, influence, and also the occult associations that they have as well too. Probably a step below that is what you would call extended bloodlines. And a lot of these houses pass on their authority to the next generation just in the male line of their house to preserve not just the bloodline but also the control and power. It's passed down through the family. It never leaves the family. But also they marry out sisters of those houses, intermarry with other prominent and powerful influencers as well, or get into key financial centers and corporations and whatnot. You get power through marriage, so that's an extended bloodline. And so you'll see different examples where the Rothschilds marry into the Montefiore and they will work together. It becomes a massive network of interconnected power bases, but apparently the Rothschilds is leading the financial aspect of it. But keep in mind there are extended bloodlines of the sisters, the brothers-in-laws, and the extended family from that who are also in key corporate positions, different houses of their own, maybe different bloodlines of their own, royal bloodlines. There are extended bloodlines. So they're not as powerful as the key houses and the main bloodlines, but they are very, very close. And I suspect that Adolf Hitler is in this branch, this level of the hierarchy. He's in the extended bloodlines, and maybe not necessarily by blood, although it appears he may be, but apparently he has some close ties to those houses and bloodlines where he is regarded as very close. That's all we can say. He appears to be a lot closer. He appears to have some type of relation to them. That's all we can say. We don't know exactly what it is. But he is obviously receiving preferential treatment when you look at history. A next level down could be what you call power brokers. And these are individuals, puppets who are pushed to the front. They play their role. They are important individuals. They do have certain financial power and corporate power, and sometimes degrees of power as a president or king of a country as well. But many of them are puppets still. They are placeholders. They are just there holding the power. They don't truly make the decisions. They are the person, an individual pushed out to the front, pushed out to the public, so that the news has something to talk about, social media has something to talk about. All the attention is on that individual, but they are only the puppet. The puppet masters do not like attention at all. So they will push someone to the front. And that's what you'll see with President Putin and King Charles and the President of China and Bill Gates and Schwab and Soros. They do have money. They do have power, corporate power as well too. But when you compare their financial abilities and their financial power and their corporate reach and their influence, it pales in comparison to the houses of power, the Rothschilds and those in the upper echelons. There's no comparison whatsoever. What Soros and Schwab and Bill Gates have is not even pocket change compared to those above them. And so that's one way you know the influence of their power. And also when you look at some of these individuals such as Putin, the President of China, and King Charles even, they have very limited personal power. They are hindered by their own country's constitutions and laws and courts and separations of powers in their own governments. And for example, for King Charles, his role is really largely ceremonial now at this point. The authority of the king has really been watered down. It's really ceremonial almost. And so that's another reason why I have Hitler on a higher level, because he operated at a higher level. He operated on the Führer principle, where he was a dictator. Everything he dictated was law. They didn't go through Congress. What he said was law. He didn't even have to write it down. It was law. That's what makes a dictator a dictator. They dictate law. Their words are literally the law. Whereas Putin and King Charles, they don't have that kind of power. They have a lot of influence, and they have a lot of toys in their kingdom to play with, but they don't have that personal power where they can just state laws. And that is one way where you can identify who the seventh king is. The seventh king had power. He operated on the same level as Nebuchadnezzar, just whatever he said was law. And that's the statue in Daniel. That's the significance of those historic kings that came in that line. Adolf Hitler was the only king in our modern time who worked on that level and with such a world impact. He could dictate law. No other king or president in our time has that power whatsoever. Even King Charles, who's going to be crowned here in May, it's really just a ceremonial role at this point because his country's run by parliament. They make all the decisions. But even there in London, you can see the Rothschilds have more power over Charles. King Charles knows who really pulls the strings in London and in the world. It's the Rothschilds. This is a real picture at the Clarence House. The Rothschilds, those with real power and real money, they tell him what to do. And he will do it whether he likes it or not. He doesn't have a choice because he doesn't have real power. Those above him have real power. This is important when we consider the Bible tells us that the seventh and eighth king is going to have real power. So that eliminates a lot of competition and eliminates a lot of the distractions and red herrings that are pushed out into the public's eye. There are also strategic players that have a degree of money and influence and governmental connections, but not quite as much as some of the higher power brokers. They are involved and they get a lot of attention in the news too. And sometimes you can tell with the strategic players that they have a lot of occult interest as part of their backstory, preparing them for their position. So they are playing a strategic role as a puppet. They're very strategic and prepared for a certain role, but they're not the ones calling the shots. And then there are also willful pawns. And these are just puppets pushed out to the public front again. They constantly have handlers around them telling them what to do and what to say. You can't get them away from a teleprompter because they are not intelligent enough to think on their own. Because they know they're not in power. They're not the ones calling the shots. They don't know the whole picture. That's why they rely on teleprompters, because they're not intelligent. They don't actually hold power to talk about. They don't know what's going on. And so don't be distracted by willful pawns and strategic players or even power brokers, because they have handlers. They are following teleprompters, but they don't know what's really going on. They just know their little role, and they have handlers helping them do it too. There's also clueless pawns, and you'll see a lot of this primarily in Masonic organizations. There's a lot of people who are involved in the organizations that the power brokers may be in, and the strategic players, they may be at the top of those organizations or corporations manipulating them. But there's a lot of clueless pawns who join it and part of it because of the business connections and just opportunities that they wouldn't have if they're not in the club. But most people who join the Freemasons, they never get beyond the third degree. So they really have no idea what the whole organization's about. And so a lot is kept secret, knowing that most of them won't go beyond the third degree. Of course, for the third degree, you got to swear to embrace the darkness. That should be a big clue that Christians should have nothing to do with Freemasonry whatsoever. But there's a lot of people who get involved in it, who are sucked up into it because they see it as business opportunities and circles of power and influence. But by them being in it, they lend power and influence to those who are controlling those organizations. So there's more of the clueless pawns. By the time you get to the top, there's very, very few people up there because they want to keep those cards very close to their chest. So they will limit the circle that the information is circulated into. And then, of course, at the very top is the principals and the rulers of spiritual darkness. What most people see as they look outside their cardboard box, or they look at the walls of their cardboard box, that's what they're really looking at. The walls and barriers that are constructed around them. And so their view of society and the world will be formed by the walls that are built around them, the cardboard box. Because all they can see in the news and on social media and what everybody's talking about is these men of straw. These men that have no real substance, that have no real power. They have a degree of power and influence, but they have no real power. They're just men of straw. They're just straw men pushed out to the front for the people to get the focus and attention on them and not who's really running the show. So as we look at prophecy and we look at what's going to be unfolding and who's preparing the way for the beast who's coming, who are going to hand their power over to him, it's a very small number who have far more power than the men of straw that we commonly see in the news. Which tells you that those that you see in the news, they are a distraction. They are red herring. They don't have the power to hand over power of nations, entire nations, multiple nations at one time to the beast. They don't have the power to do that. They don't have the authority to do that. They take their marching orders from those who are above them. There are men of straw who play their roles. They're just puppets. And so again, we keep this in context. What does Scripture tell us about prophecy, how things will go? There are 10 very, very powerful leaders who have more power than kings, than even presidents. But they aren't kings. They aren't presidents. They are actually staying out of the limelight on purpose, even though they have more power than a president. They are waiting for a moment where they will come out into the limelight, but right now they are extremely powerful, getting things ready. We also know they are affiliated with the Vatican, with the harlot. And of course the harlot has its own hierarchies of power in different areas, financially, Jesuits as well too, actual political power, ambassadors. They have political power, far more than most people realize. They are affiliated with these very powerful brokers. But there's also affiliations with such as Freemasonry, large organizations that there's a lot of overlap, particularly since the Vatican Masonic coup. There is huge influence and overlap of the individuals who are usually involved in multiple areas and corporations and organizations. Then there's, of course, also the occult, the Kabbalah, the philosophical groups as well too. They have their own hierarchies, again with a whole lot of overlap. Satan's house is divided. Even Jesus Christ said this, and this is something we have to keep in mind as we look at political events unfolding. A lot of Christians I see get hung up by saying, well, they can't work against each other. Why would Satan do that? Because they have a divided house. It's bad cop versus good cop. There are reasons why they want the world to think that these are all separate groups, but they are all working together in the sense that those controlling them know the outcome. By themselves, those different groups, such as the Vatican, the Freemasons, they see a partial chunk of where everything's headed and going. They don't see the full picture. So they'll only act in their capacity, sometimes against other groups that are also controlled by the 10 kings, such as they'll work against Catholicism, which has a public stance against Freemasonry. But there's a lot of where they're working behind the scenes, too. The Bible tells us the Antichrist is coming with all power and lying wonders. He's bringing his army with him. He's not using an American army for his purposes, or the EU army or NATO army and all that. He's bringing his own army. He's already preparing his army somewhere, and the Bible tells us, Revelation 9, that his army is coming up out of the bottomless pit with him. The whole swarm of locust creatures that are coming up with him. And there's also a suspicion that he's probably getting forces from locations in Antarctica too, different helpers from there. He's coming with his army. The Bible makes it very clear. He's coming with power. He's not using power and armies that are here already. When he comes onto the scene, he's going to be vaporizing and uprooting 3 nations that are already here, existing ones. But the 10 kings are going to orchestrate handing over that plurality of nations to him. Like any revolution, when a revolution happens and a change of power, there's always a purge. There is always a purge. Do not be surprised, because they have no loyalty to their own whatsoever. The children of darkness have no loyalty to each other. Satan has no loyalty to his disciples. And you see that in the music industry and entertainment industry, those who sell their soul to Satan, he ruins their lives. He does not care about them. Even their own demons torment them. When the Antichrist comes on the scene, there's going to be a lot of his disciples who find out that they are as worthless as used toilet paper in his eyes, because he's going to dispose of them. And particularly as we see America and the whole currency and financial system of America, the dollar system, apparently being set up as a phoenix to self-destruct when the Antichrist comes on the scene, as a segue to bring a lot of nations on that financial system to their knees. It really appears that way, which also tells you that all those who are currently in those systems in those countries, they are going to be thrown under the bus too. All the Masonic lodges, all the different Kabbalah groups, the different occult groups, they're going to wake up one day and realize they are thrown under the bus. They did not know the full picture, so they thought they were okay. They thought the scourge would pass over them, but they're going to find out real quickly it's not. Because in any revolution, any change of power, the first rule, it's almost the unwritten rule, you get rid of those who helped you come to power. Because you know they are going to be your number one competition. And if those who helped you in a revolution would be willing to be traitors to their former countries, you cannot rely on their loyalty to you. So that's why in every revolution there's always a purge of the top leadership. And some of the most strategic players, they're purged. You get rid of them because you cannot trust their loyalty. And they've passed their usefulness. You don't need them anymore. When the Antichrist comes on the scene, he's a blasphemer. He hates God. Everything he's doing will be open. There won't be a need for occult, for hidden organizations. There won't be a need for the Freemasons anymore. There won't be a need for the occult groups anymore because he's going to do everything openly. That's the end game. Do everything openly. So there's going to be a lot of organizations who have zero use anymore. Their power structure of being secret is of no use anymore. None. So they're just thrown away. And of course, the Bible plainly tells us he's going to turn on the harlot, turn on the whore. All 10 kings who had a close relationship with the Vatican will turn on it and destroy it because the relationship is no longer advantageous. And now that the beast is here, they don't need her anymore. And they're openly going to practice who they really are anyway, the children of darkness, which would be a conflict with the public views of the Vatican. So that's competition right there too. So you eliminate that competition. And the Bible tells us this very clearly. He's going to be purging a large chunk of what we know belongs to the Antichrist and has already been working with blasphemy, promoting it in the world, the harlot. There's a lot of strategic players and people in high ranks of the Freemasons. They look around at other Freemasons at their same rank in different high places of authority and corporations and influence, and they think, oh wow, all these Freemasons are in these high levels. That means we're going to be safe with what's coming. And same in the other esoteric groups. They look at other members who they know are in the same club and the same status throughout business and the world, and they think, oh, we're in a special category. We're going to be safe. But they're going to find out one day that they have been used. They were a pawn after all the whole time. And they're also going to find out the whole time that they've been lied to the whole time. Because a lot of people join the Masons, they go up in the ranks and they get involved in these different esoteric groups that they know have power. People are lulled into these groups by the lies of, oh, you're important. We think you're important. We think you need to be a part of this group or this corporation, what we're doing. We want you. We need you because you are a special person. But they are going to find out real quickly that they weren't special at all. They are being played as a pawn. Played as a pawn. There's no real intelligence that they were looking at. They wanted your power. They wanted your influence. They wanted a fall guy. That's what they wanted. When the 10 kings hand over the power and authority to the beast, the other structures are no longer needed. It's time to eliminate the competition. Methodology. This is a very important key that Christians need to keep in mind, especially trying to think like serpents. The enemy will routinely appear to be working against their own interests, but they have a deceptive goal in mind. The Bible tells us, for such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, of doing right things, whose end shall be according to their works. This is a hurdle that I see a lot of Christians come into as you talk about certain prophetic events that are about to happen, and they always reply with, I don't see how that could work out, because that would seem to be working against their own interests. The Bible tells us that that should be no marvel. That shouldn't even be a hurdle whatsoever, because this is standard method of operation for the children of darkness. No marvel. Don't even marvel about this. If you see the children of darkness, if you see the serpents apparently even biting other serpents and attacking other serpents, don't be surprised at it. Don't be surprised that the children of darkness control the Vatican, which is apparently and publicly against the Freemasons. We are told straight up that Satan himself will even transform himself into an angel of light. He will appear to be doing good, righteous things even though that would be diametrically opposed to his true nature. And so this is also important as we look at history and different events coming together and what we think the children of darkness will be doing as they weave and prepare things to hand over. They will sometimes work and control the opposite side, like good cop, bad cop. They will control both sides for a third interest. They will have a reason why they transform themselves, apparently even fighting against their own purposes. But the Bible tells us don't marvel about it. It should be no great thing at all for us to consider that, yes, they will sometimes apparently act against their own interest because they know it's going to result in another result. They have another goal in mind. The end is not to be an angel of light. They are transforming themselves into an angel of light or a positive side aspect to whatever they may be working. They will do that temporarily because it's going to lead to something else. Being the angel of light or the white hat or the good cop, being on the good side of things, however they appear, that's only temporary because they are doing it because it will lead to something else. Obviously, most Christians know there are wolves in sheep's clothing in the churches. Their end goal isn't to be a fake Christian just for that in of itself. They're working and being that temporarily to lead to apostasy and false doctrines being prevalent in the church. They are using it as a tool, even sometimes when they appear to be working against their own interests. Because, like Paul says, this should be no marvel. This is the number one method of operation that the children of darkness will use. And this confuses so many Christians because they marvel at it and they can't get over that hurdle. They'll sometimes look at two different groups or two different goals or outcomes in prophecy and say, I don't think the children of darkness are doing that or going in that direction because that would appear to go against their own interest. And so they're hung up on that because they can't see that's not the end goal. The enemy will take both of those and manipulate both sides because it will lead to a third outcome. The two conditions that they create are not the end goal. They want to create a third condition. They will bring two conditions together, many times in conflict with each other, and that conflict will result in a third condition, and they will manipulate and steer the outcome so that it creates that outcome. This is known as thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. It is the overlap. It is how two opposing conditions come together. They will create both conditions that appear to be opposing, but it's that overlap. When they come into conflict, it is that conflict that creates what they really want. And you will find as the children of darkness orchestrate events, they will have agents, steerers, handlers on one side, on the opposing side, and they will usually have an agent in the middle, a steering committee so that the outcome, so that the condition ends up the way they want. They will bring opposing forces together to create a condition and have agents controlling all aspects of it. It's a controlled reaction. And this is the whole principle that you should not marvel about, order out of chaos. This is why Paul says you should not marvel about this. It's no great thing. This is how they work all the time. Order out of chaos. They will create chaos. They will create conditions and organizations and setups that you would think these are naturally opposed to each other. That's the whole idea. Because it's in that opposition that creates the conditions for what they really want, the outcome, the condition, the synthesis. And they will have agents along the different steps of the way steering the conditions to result in the proper controlled outcome. And this is what you need to see when you look at the history and what Jesus Christ said you will see, but the end is not yet. You're going to see all these historical events. Take historical note of these events. You will see them because they are the beginning of sorrows. These are being manipulated. These are being orchestrated. And it is going to have something to do with the sorrows that are coming later. that is near, even at the door, that's coming, that end that is coming, that sudden destruction is coming. It is related to those other historical events. And it's going to be a series of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, manipulating opposing events, opposing forces, wars, to create conditions. And that's why they like to create wars so much, because it creates conditions for change. A lot of people in the world, countries and governments, they don't like to change. You have to ruffle their feathers. And so that's why war conditions are so conducive to moving things around and getting major changes forced through, creating new conditions. So they will have their agents involved on both sides and steering agents to control the outcome, because they know what they want. They want the outcome. They will steer the wars to end up the way that they want. The war itself is not the outcome. They want the rearrangement of the nations, or the rearrangement of power bases. That's what they want. So they will steer the wars in those directions. They will create wars that will sometimes lose on purpose because of the conditions it will create. That's what they really want. So they're going to be working all these different levels of order out of chaos, creating the chaos for the ultimate end game that they know is coming, the sudden destruction, the sudden chaos. That is the end game that they have in mind. Right at the beginning of the tribulation, there is going to be sudden destruction. World War III. It's being created on purpose because it will create the ideal conditions to hand over power to the beast. The thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. It'll be completely demoralizing to the world, a great sacrifice to the occult, and many other reasons, but it will get everything ready. The world will say who can make war with the beast, and they will surrender and sign a surrender compact with the beast. Order out of chaos. Do not marvel that this is the number one methodology through history of how the children of darkness work. They will take a country that has a large industry, a large army, large fighting force, planes and soldiers. They are very powerful. They will take a country like that, and they will actually pair it with the antithesis of it, with an engineered conflict where the desired outcome forces them to lose. Even though strategically they shouldn't have lost. They will get involved in wars and foreign entanglements. They will get into situations where the agents who are steering that country will steer it to actually lose. Something that they should not have lost. But strategic mistakes will be made on purpose so that that nation will be humbled. It will be an engineered conflict and outcome to lose. And they will steer it so that at the end, that powerful nation will have little desire for patriotism, nationalism, sovereignty. They will kill the fighting spirit. Get them involved in foreign entanglements so where all the youth and the young men of that nation will not want to die for that nation because it would be a waste of their life. Especially as you are preparing for a world government, you want to nip nationalism and patriotism in the bud. You want to kill that fighting spirit. You want to kill patriotism. You want to kill nationalism, because that is the chief competitor of the one world ruler who's coming onto the scene. You have to get rid of competitors, really take that down several notches before he comes onto the scene. So you'll see that worked in several nations over history within this last generation, where nations are basically humiliated and they lose the fighting spirit. And you see that definitely with Germany today, because they were in an engineered losing that was done on purpose. This also brings up the subject, the other hurdle that a lot of Christians have conflict with. They cannot see Hitler as the Antichrist, even though he matches everything Scripture says. They cannot get over, how in the world will Israel, there's no way Israel or the Jewish people would make a covenant with Hitler. There's no way. They can't get over that. Whereas you need to look at what the Scriptures say. It's no marvel when you understand their methodology. Order out of chaos. And also you're working and talking about the children of darkness. You need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But don't think like a dove, think like a serpent. If children of darkness are the rulers and pulling the strings in the nation of Israel now, what would they have in common with Hitler, with the Antichrist, one who blasphemes God, blasphemes even the temple, the key interest to the people of Israel, just from a cultural perspective even? What do both of these groups have in common? They both have in common the light of the world, Jesus of Nazareth. They both hate him. They both had the same enemy. Hitler definitely hated Jesus Christ. The Antichrist blasphemes God and Jesus Christ, blasphemes everything about him. But also the Jews, because of their hatred of Christianity, they've also rejected Jesus Christ. Even most secular Jews just have a completely negative attitude against Jesus Christ because of the way they've been taught by their rabbis and just cultural understanding, how they've been treated by so-called Christians too down through the years too. That's really turned them off. So both of them have a common enemy. They both rabidly hate Jesus Christ, which means the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Familiar concept, right? You take two opposing forces, Hitler and the nation of Israel, Jews, who would normally be diametrically opposed enemies, but because they have the same enemy, they can be friends and allies against that enemy because they have common interests. And because their common interest is so strong and rabid, they will choose a Barabbas, one who even kills their own, over Jesus Christ. Even over their own interests. Even to the wronging of their own soul. Because they love death. And when you love death, you will wrong your own soul. And so because of these conditions and the children of darkness who are in key places in Israel and part of its formation, definitely steering it and handling it today, the ones who are preparing for the beast to come onto the scene, they're some of the same ones involved in pulling the strings in Israel right now too. They're working toward these conditions because they have the same interest. They have the same enemy, which means there's a lot they are willing to overlook as allies. And they also have vested interest in a certain structure that both the children of darkness on either side have interest in too. Of course, the children of darkness on the Antichrist side know that they will be taking advantage of the other side later on, but they purportedly have the same structural interest too. They have a lot more in common than they don't, and they're willing to overlook what they don't have in common for what they do. The Bible tells us this is no marvel. This is how they work. Everybody knows it today, especially order out of chaos. That is their methodology. Bring together events that would not normally seem to go together, but you do it on purpose. You control the outcome with agents, handlers, and steering agents so that it results in the exact condition, the synthesis that you desire. And this is how they will orchestrate world events to get the location of the crossroads of the world, knowing different prophetic events are going to play out there. For the prophetic events that God has already foretold us, they are just pawns working to fulfill what he has said. Thank you for joining us on our study today. Stay tuned for part 3 of this study. And until next time, Maranatha.